Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
The morning mist clung to my vineyard like a lover's whisper, and I was there before dawn, as I had been for 23 years. My fingers moved across the grape skins with the practiced touch of someone who'd learned to read the language of wine long before most people learned to read books. Each cluster told me a story of rain and sunshine, of patience and timing, of the delicate dance between earth and sky that creates something magical. I was 52 that autumn, and I built Ross Estate Winery from nothing but stubborn dreams and my late husband Gerald's insurance money. The critics called my wines traditional, old world, nostalgic. I wore those labels like badges of honor. In a world obsessed with innovation and instant gratification, I was the keeper of something sacred, the art of letting time work. It's magic. That's when she appeared on my television screen like a beautiful nightmare. Taylor Cook, 28 years old, with platinum blonde hair that defied gravity and opinions that defied everything I believed about wine. She had her own YouTube channel, Wine Simplified, where she taught millennials to appreciate wine through technology, apps, and what she called accessible tasting. She made wine seem as casual as ordering coffee, stripping away the reverence I'd spent decades cultivating. If your wine needs a museum curator to explain it, she said during one particularly infuriating episode, her green eyes sparkling with mischief as she gestured at the camera with a glass of some mass-produced Pinot Grigio. Then it's not wine, it's a eulogy for grapes that died in vain. I threw my remote at the television that night. The universe, apparently, has a twisted sense of humor. 3 weeks later, the California Wine Council announced their annual debate series, and somehow, some weight, Taylor Cook and I were selected as opposing speakers for the topic. Traditional versus modern, the future of American wine. The debate hall was packed that October evening, buzzing with the kind of energy that comes when people smell blood in the water. I wore my best linen blazer, the color of champagne, my silver hair pulled back in a classic chignon. I looked the part of the establishment I represented, refined, dignified, unshakable. Taylor arrived in a tailored emerald vest that matched. Her eyes in black slacks that hugged her curves like they were custom-made. Her confidence filled the room like expensive perfume, and I hated how much I noticed the way she moved, fluid, predatory, like a cat who knew exactly which mouse she planned to catch. We shook hands for the cameras, and her palm was warm against mine, her grip firm and challenging. "Ms. Ross," she said, her voice honeyed with false sweetness. "I'm looking forward to this." "I'm sure you are," I replied, my smile equally practiced. The moderator introduced us, and I went first, speaking about heritage, about the responsibility we had to preserve the traditions that made wine more than just fermented grape juice. I talked about terroir, about the romance of winemaking, about respecting the process that had remained unchanged for centuries. The audience was with me. I could feel it in their attention, their nods of approval. I was winning. Then Taylor stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying easily across the room without any artificial amplification. "I'd like you to imagine something. You're at a restaurant. You've had a long day. You want a glass of wine that will make you feel good, help you relax, maybe pair nicely with your pasta. The sommelier brings you a wine list that reads like a history textbook. You need a PhD to understand half the descriptions. You end up ordering a beer instead." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. I felt my first stab of unease. "That," Taylor continued, turning to face me directly, "is what happens when we make wine about everything except the wine itself. When we turn pleasure into homework." She was good. Damn her, she was really good. The debate continued for an hour, and with each exchange, the temperature in the room seemed to rise. She challenged everything, my methods, my philosophy, even my market share. But it was what she said near the end that really got under my skin. "Tell me, Miss Ross," she said, that infuriating smirk playing at the corners of her mouth as she held the microphone like a weapon. "Do you actually taste the past in those bottles, or just your own nostalgia?" The crowd laughed, actually laughed at my expense. My jaw tightened so hard I thought my teeth might crack. The moderator was already moving to close the debate, but I couldn't let it end like that. I wouldn't. I took the microphone, and when I spoke, my voice was steady as aged wine, cool as a cellar in July. "I taste time, Miss Cook, something your generation swallows without savoring." The silence that followed was electric. Taylor's eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite identify: anger, respect, something else entirely. After the debate, they shoved us together for photographs. Standard practice, the combatants shaking hands, proving it was all intellectual discourse and no hard feelings. But when Taylor's hand settled at my waist for the photo, her fingers lingered a beat too long. She leaned in close enough that I could smell her perfume, something modern and bold, with notes of bergamot and white tea. "You're so much hotter when you're pissed," she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. My breath hitched. Actually hitched, like I was some schoolgirl getting her first compliment. The camera flashed, capturing what I was sure was a look of complete shock on my face. Rivalry? I found myself thinking as she pulled away with that same maddening smile. Oh, this was far more dangerous. This was chemistry with a cork ready to pop. 3 weeks passed, and I couldn't get Taylor Cook out of my head. I told myself it was professional irritation. She represented everything wrong with modern wine culture. But when I found myself watching her YouTube videos at 2 a.m, critiquing her technique while secretly admiring the graceful way her hands moved around the wine glass, I knew I was lying to myself. The California Wine Council's annual gala was the kind of event where appearances mattered more than authenticity. 500 of the industry's most important people gathered to network, schmooze, and pretend that wine was about art rather than money. I wore my grandmother's pearls and a black cocktail dress that had cost more than most people's monthly rent. I was Isabel Ross, respected vintner and industry veteran, and I played the part perfectly. For the first 2 hours, the problem with being successful in a traditional industry is that everyone assumes you want to hear their theories about why tradition is dying. By 9 o'clock, I'd been cornered by 3 different investors who wanted to explain why I needed to modernize my brand, and one food blogger who insisted that natural wines were so over. I escaped to the cellar beneath the event hall, where the host's private collection was displayed like trophies. The temperature was perfect 55 degrees and humid enough to preserve cork integrity. More importantly, it was quiet. I was examining a 1982 Bordeaux when I heard footsteps on the stone stairs, hiding from your adoring public. Taylor's voice cut through the cellar's hushed atmosphere like a blade through silk. I didn't turn around, enjoying some peace and quiet, something in short supply when you're around. She laughed, and the sound bounced off the wine racks in a way that made it seem like she was everywhere at once. "Come on, Isabel. You can't tell me you're not having fun with all this." "All what?" "The tension, the arguments. The way you get that little vein in your forehead when I challenge your sacred cow traditions." I did turn around then, and immediately regretted it. She changed from her earlier gown into dark jeans and a silk blouse that was unbuttoned just enough to be distracting. Her hair was down, falling in waves over her shoulders, and she looked less like the polished media personality and more like well, like a woman. "I don't have a vein," I said, though my hand instinctively moved to my forehead. "You do." Right there. She stepped closer, and I could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. It's actually kind of cute. We stood there for a moment, the air between us thick with something I didn't want to name. Then she noticed the wine in my hands. Oh, interesting choice. The 82 Bordeaux. Heavy sulfite content, though. Probably. Gives you headaches. My temper, which had been simmering all evening, finally boiled over. There's nothing wrong with sulfites when they're used properly. They preserve the wine's integrity, prevent oxidation. They also mask the true flavor of the grapes. Modern techniques. Modern techniques sacrifice complexity for convenience. And traditional techniques sacrifice accessibility for ego. Before I knew what I was doing, I was moving toward her, my finger pointed at her chest like a weapon. You don't know what you're talking about. You think winemaking is some kind of chemistry experiment you can perfect with gadgets and apps, but you're missing the entire point. Wine is about patience, about understanding that some things can't be rushed or simplified or reduced to data points on your precious technology. She didn't back down. Instead, she stepped closer until we were almost touching. And you think wine is some kind of religious experience that only the chosen few can understand. You're so busy protecting your little temple that you've forgotten. Wine is supposed to bring people together, not drive them away. At least I respect the process. And I respect the people who drink it. We were arguing about sulfites, but we both knew we weren't really arguing about sulfites. We were arguing about everything, about age and youth, tradition and progress, the past and the future. We were arguing about things that had nothing to do with wine and everything to do with the way she looked at me like I was a puzzle she wanted to solve. And then she did something that changed everything. She reached past me to adjust the temperature gauge on the wine rack, her body brushing against mine as she moved. But instead of stepping back, she stayed there, close enough that I could count. Her eyelashes. Your precious 98 Bordeaux blend, she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The one you're so proud of. It's 3 degrees too warm. I looked at the bottle she was indicating my prize vintage, the wine that had won me international recognition and secured Ross Estate's reputation. She was right. The temperature was slightly off. I snapped. I shoved her, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to push her back against the wine racks. Bottles clinked against each other in protest, and for a moment I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Then Taylor laughed. Not a polite laugh or a nervous laugh, but a real laugh, full of delight and something that sounded almost like relief. There she is, she said, her eyes bright with approval. The real Isabel Ross, not the polished professional, not the industry darling, just ... you. She pushed off from the wine rack and crowded me back against a wooden barrel, her hands coming up to rest on either side of my face. Go on, she said, her voice low and challenging and absolutely devastating. Show me how experienced you are. The kiss was all teeth and tannins, desperate and angry and perfect. My back hit the barrel hard enough to hurt, but I didn't care. Because Taylor's hands were fumbling with the buttons of my dress, and her mouth tasted like the wine we'd been arguing about. Complex and layered and absolutely intoxicating. I should have stopped it. I should have pushed her away, reminded both of us that this was insane. I was 52 years old, a respected businesswoman with a reputation to protect. She was 28, impulsive, and everything I'd built my career opposing. Instead, I pulled her closer. My hands found the silk of her blouse, the warm skin beneath it. She made a sound against my mouth, half gasp, half moan, that sent heat racing through my veins like wine through a decanter. Her fingers were in my hair, destroying my careful chignon, and I didn't care. I didn't care about anything except the way she felt against me, the way she kissed like she argued with complete conviction and no holding back. Taylor, I breathed against her mouth. and she pulled back just enough to look at me, her green eyes dark with want. "Say it again," she whispered. "Taylor." She kissed me again, softer this time, but no less intense, and I understood with perfect clarity that I was falling. Not just into desire, though that was certainly part of it, but into something much more dangerous. I was falling for Taylor Cook, the woman who challenged everything I believed and made me feel more alive than I had in years. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against mine. "This is crazy," she said. "Completely insane," I agreed. "Good," she said, and kissed me again. I woke up alone the next morning in my own bed, with no memory of how I'd gotten there. My dress was draped carefully over a chair, my shoes lined up neatly by the door. For a moment, I wondered if I'd dreamed the entire thing. Then I saw the mirror in my bathroom. Written in red lipstick, my red lipstick, were Taylor's tasting notes from the night before. Complex. Layered. Unexpected finish. "Too old? Honey, you ruined me." I stared at those words for a long time, my reflection fractured by the red script. She'd called me complex, layered. She'd called me honey. And I'd ruined her. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it made me smile. If I thought that night in the cellar would be the end of it, a moment of madness. We'd both pretend never happened. I was spectacularly wrong. The wine industry, for all its pretensions to sophistication, gossips like a small town. By the end of the week, the whispers had started. "Did you see Isabel Ross and that cook girl at the gala? Someone said they disappeared together, ... Well, she is a widow, and that girl does have a reputation." I tried to ignore it. I'd spent decades building my reputation on the quality of my wine, not the details of my personal life. Gerald had been gone for 8 years. I was a grown woman, free to make my own choices about who I spent time with. But the whispers became headlines when someone leaked security footage from the gala. Grainy, black and white images of Taylor and me in what was obviously an intimate conversation. You couldn't see the kiss, thank God, but the body language was unmistakable. Wine industry veterans and young influencer, an unlikely alliance. Ross Estates Isabel Ross spotted with controversial wine blogger, desperate cougar, or savvy business. Move? The Isabel Ross Taylor Cook connection. That last headline made me throw my coffee mug across the kitchen. It shattered against the wall, leaving a brown stain that looked remarkably like my wounded pride. My sister Catherine called within. "An hour. Isabel Marie Ross, what the hell are you thinking?" Catherine was 3 years older than me and had never let me forget it. She'd married well, had 3 successful children, and considered herself the family expert on appropriate behavior. The fact that she was calling me by my full name meant I was in serious trouble. "I'm thinking it's none of your business, Catherine." "None of my business?" "Your face is on the cover of Wine Spectator with some blonde bimbo who's young enough to be your daughter." "Of course it's my business. You're embarrassing the entire family." "She's 28, not 18, and she's not a bimbo." "Oh, so you are involved with her?" I rubbed my temples, feeling that vein Taylor had mentioned beginning to throb. "It's complicated." "It's not complicated, Isabel. It's pathetic. You're a 52-year-old woman chasing after some influencer who's clearly using you for attention. She's probably planning to write a tell-all book about sleeping with a desperate widow. That's enough, Catherine." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've lost your damn mind. Gerald's been gone 8 years, and this is how you honor his memory? By making a fool of yourself with some child who makes YouTube videos?" I hung up on her, but Catherine's words stuck with me, especially when Taylor's mentor, a respected sommelier named Marcus Webb, went on record with his concerns. "Taylor's always been ambitious," he told Wine Business Monthly. but I worry she's getting involved with people who collect beautiful things instead of appreciating them. Isabel Ross has a reputation for acquiring rare vintages, rare art, rare experiences. I hope Taylor understands the difference between being valued and being collected. The article ran with a photo of Taylor at some industry event looking young and bright and full of potential. Next to it was a photo of me in my cellar, surrounded by bottles that probably cost more than most people's cars. The contrast was impossible to miss. I was the established collector, she was the shiny new acquisition. The criticism hurt, but what came next nearly destroyed me. The IRS audit notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a stern-faced agent who looked like she'd never enjoyed a glass of wine in her life. Gerald's finances, which I'd assumed were rock solid, were apparently riddled with irregularities. Money that should have been in our business accounts was missing. Investments that were supposed to be secure had vanished into offshore accounts I'd never heard of. The numbers were staggering. If the government's suspicions were correct, Ross Estate owed nearly $2 million in back taxes and penalties. Gerald hadn't been the careful businessman I thought he was. He'd been a gambler, and his luck had run out after his death. I sat in my office, surrounded by tax documents and legal papers, and felt my world crumbling around me. Everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for, was at risk. The vineyard, the winery, my reputation, all of it could be gone within months. I did what any reasonable person would do in my situation. I got spectacularly drunk. I started with a bottle of my own Chardonnay, the 2018 vintage that had won 3 gold medals and been featured in Food and Wine. It tasted like sawdust and broken dreams. I moved on to a bottle of Pinot Noir that I'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed special enough. By the time I'd finished the second bottle, I was sitting on the floor of my cellar, surrounded by the ghosts of better times. Every bottle represented a memory, a moment when I believed I was building something permanent. Now they all looked like expensive mistakes. That's where Taylor found me. I heard the cellar door open and her footsteps on the stairs, but I didn't look up. I was too busy contemplating the irony of drinking myself into oblivion while surrounded by some of the finest wines in California. Isabel? Her voice was soft, concerned. Your housekeeper let me in. She said, ... Jesus, what happened? She knelt beside me, and I finally looked at her. She was wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked impossibly young and beautiful and everything I wasn't. Go away, Taylor. My voice was steadier than I felt. Before someone takes another picture and destroys what's left of your reputation. I don't care about pictures. You should. You should care about a lot of things. Like the fact that I'm apparently a desperate cougar who collects beautiful things. Like the fact that my dead husband was a criminal and I'm about to lose everything. Like the fact that being with me is career suicide for someone like you. She was quiet for a long moment, just kneeling there beside me while I wallowed in wine and self-pity. Then she spoke, and her voice was firm as steel. We fix this together. But first look at me. I turned to face her, and her green eyes were blazing with something I'd never seen before. Not desire, not anger, but determination. I don't care what the gossips say about us. I don't care what my mentor thinks, or your sister, or anyone else. And I sure as hell don't care about your husband's mistakes. What I care about is this. She gestured around the cellar at the wine and the oak barrels and the evidence of decades of careful work. What I care about is what you've built here, what we could build together. Taylor, no, let me finish. You think I'm using you? Fine. You think I'm too young to understand what real love looks like? Maybe. But I know what talent looks like. I know what passion looks like. And I know what happens when someone with your knowledge and my technology work together instead of against each other. She stood up and offered me her hand. Come on, we're going to save your vineyard. The solution was audacious, probably insane, and absolutely perfect. A collaboration wine, Taylor explained as we sat in my kitchen the next morning, both of Jewess nursing massive hangovers and even more massive cups of coffee. Your traditional methods, my modern marketing. Your terroir, my technology. We create something that's never been done before, wine that bridges the gap between classic and contemporary. And you think people will buy it? I think people will buy it because of the story. The established vintner and the young innovator working together. The traditional estate collaborating with the social media generation. It's David and Goliath, except they team up instead of fighting. She was right, and I knew it. The wine industry loved a good story almost as much as it loved good wine. Romeo and Juliet selling Bordeaux. Beauty and the Beast making Pinot Noir. But there was more to it than marketing, and we both knew it. Working together meant spending time together. It meant learning each other's methods, understanding each other's philosophies. It meant risking everything on the chance that what we felt in that cellar could translate into something sustainable. It meant falling in love deliberately and completely. We started with the grapes. Taylor brought equipment I'd never seen. Before sensors that could measure sugar content in real time, software that predicted optimal harvest dates based on weather patterns and soil analysis. I brought knowledge that couldn't be digitized the way morning mist affected flavor development, the subtle differences between grapes from north-facing and south-facing slopes, the art of knowing when potential became perfection. Your Cabernet Sauvignon, she said one morning as we walked through the vineyards, her tablet showing colorful graphs and charts. The data says it's ready, but you don't think it is. The data is wrong. How can you tell? I plucked a grape from the nearest vine and crushed it between my fingers, tasting the juice. The tannins are still too sharp. Give it another week. She watched me with fascination, then pulled out her phone and started recording. Can you explain what you're tasting? For the video, you want to put this on your YouTube channel? I want to show people what real expertise looks like. What? Decades of experience can teach you that no app can replace. For the first time since we'd started working together, I understood what she was really doing. She wasn't trying to modernize my methods or simplify my philosophy. She was trying to translate it, to build a bridge between my world and hers. The wine we created together was unlike anything either of us had made before. We used traditional fermentation techniques, but monitored them with precision instruments. We aged it in oak barrels that had been coopered by hand, but we tracked the aging process with sensors that measured oxygen levels and temperature fluctuations. We blended it according to my instincts, but verified our choices with Taylor's analytical tools. The result was a 2019 Cabernet Sauvignon that tasted like the future and the past at the same time. Complex enough to satisfy traditionalists, accessible enough to win over newcomers. It was bold and elegant, structured and approachable. It was, in a word, perfect. More importantly, it was profitable. Pre-orders based on the story alone covered most of Ross Estate's debt. When the wine actually launched, demand exceeded our most optimistic projections by 300%. But the real magic wasn't in the wine. It was in the process of making it. Working with Taylor was like dancing with someone who knew all your moves before you made them. She anticipated my decisions, complimented my weaknesses, challenged my assumptions in ways that made me better. And I could see that I was doing the same for her, tempering her impatience with wisdom, grounding her innovation with tradition. We spent our days in the vineyard and our evenings tasting different blends, debating ratios and techniques and philosophies. We argued constantly and passionately, but they were good arguments, the kind that ended with better wine and deeper. understanding. And yes, we fell into bed together most nights, exhausted and wine-stained and absolutely certain that what we were doing was either the smartest or stupidest thing either of us had ever attempted. Are we crazy? I asked her one night as we lay tangled in my sheets, her head on my shoulder and her hair spilling across my chest like liquid gold. Completely, she murmured against my skin. But crazy works for us. She was right. Crazy did. Work for us. When the first cases of our collaboration wine hit the market, the response was overwhelming. Wine critics who dismissed Taylor as a shallow influencer were forced to acknowledge her technical skill. Industry veterans who'd written me off as old-fashioned had to admit that innovation could enhance tradition rather than replace it. But the success brought its own challenges. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about our relationship. Were we? Business partners? Lovers? Both? Neither. The speculation reached a crescendo at the wine launch party we held at Ross Estate. 200 of the industry's most important people gathered to taste our creation and gossip about its creators. I wore a midnight blue dress that made me feel confident and sophisticated. Taylor wore a fitted black suit that made her look like power personified. We presented the wine together, talking about our process and our philosophy. The audience was respectful, even enthusiastic. The wine spoke for itself, and it spoke eloquently. Then, during the Q&A session, a reporter from Wine Business Daily asked the question we'd been dreading. Ms. Ross, Ms. Cook, there's been a lot of speculation about the nature of your partnership. Can you clarify your relationship for our readers? I looked at Taylor, and she looked at me. We'd discussed this moment, planned for it, but now that it was here, all our careful preparations seemed inadequate. Taylor stepped forward to the microphone. You want to know about our relationship? She said, her voice carrying easily across the room. I'll tell you about our relationship. She walked over to where I was standing and, in front of 200 people and at least a dozen cameras, dropped to one knee. From her jacket pocket, she pulled out a rolled piece of paper tied with a ribbon. Isabel Ross, she said, her voice steady despite the audible gasps from the crowd. You've taught me that some things get better with time. That patience isn't the opposite of passion, it's passion's best friend. That the most beautiful things in life are worth waiting for, worth working for, worth fighting for. She held up the paper. This is a deed to a vineyard in Sonoma County. It has both our names on it. It's where we're going to make wine together for the next 50 years, assuming you'll have me. The room was dead silent. Marry me, Isabel. Let's make decades of trouble together. I stared at her, this brilliant, infuriating, impossible woman who turned my carefully ordered life upside down and made it infinitely better. This woman who'd saved my vineyard and stolen my heart, and somehow convinced me that 52 wasn't too old to start over. This woman who was kneeling in front of me with a vineyard deed instead of a ring, offering me not just her love but her future. I could have answered with words. I could have given a speech about tradition and innovation, about love that transcends age and circumstance, about finding someone who challenges you to be better than you ever thought possible. Instead, I grabbed her by the lapels of her beautiful suit and dragged her out of the party, through the crowd of shocked spectators, and into the vineyard where we'd first learned to work together. I kissed her there under the stars, with the vines we'd tended together whispering around us, and the taste of our wine still on our lips. I kissed her like I meant it, like I'd been waiting my whole life to mean it this much. Yes, I said against her mouth. Yes to everything. We made love there in the dirt between the vine rows, our expensive clothes forgotten, our carefully maintained professional facades abandoned. We made love like we made wine, with passion and patience, with tradition, and innovation, with the understanding that the best things in life are worth the wait. Later, as we lay there catching our breath, I noticed 2 wine glasses that had been knocked over in our enthusiasm, their contents darkening the soil. They called me old, I said to Taylor, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. She captured my hand and brought it to her lips, but I knew the truth. What truth? Some flavors deepen with time and this pairing. She kissed my palm, then my wrist, then my lips. This is legendary.